Welcome back to Case Studies. I'm here with an old friend that's a new friend. So we worked around each other and taught up at BYU for 4 years now, 4.5 years, but actually haven't spent a ton of time together. And so it's been fun for me to catch up and learn about your journey, and then kind of what I'm intrigued with. And it's because I'm not political at all. Like, don't aspire to it, don't really follow it, but it's so important. It kind of intertwined in everything that we're doing, and you're actually entering this world. And so I want to talk about that. I want to take some time and get into the why and like what drives you. Cause I know, from hearing your story, kind of every step along the way, it's kind of mission driven. It's about purpose and making a difference when you're building your companies and stuff. So I want to get into that. And so anyway, just welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I feel the same. It's been good to reconnect and get to know your story more fully.
So I want to go back to the beginning, because this was when we were talking earlier, this was the piece of it that was so profound to me. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You've built businesses, and your career has spanned through some of like the craziest economic cycles that anybody living has ever experienced. Yeah. And you were kind of in the center, like in the heart of the storm and all those. So I want to go back. So you went to BYU, did your undergrad, and then you went to Duke and you did law school, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
And this was when were you finishing this up?
I graduated from Duke Law School in the spring of 2000.
Okay. So this is like right in the heart of the
dot-com,
the internet explosion.
Craziness. Yeah. Dot-com mania.
Yep.
It was right when I was coming out of law school. And if you were interested in doing deals, doing transactional work, the frontier at that time was to go out west and go to Silicon Valley. And that's where you started, that's where all the deals were happening. IPOs were happening. Big M&A work was happening.
When it explained to me, like the feeling, like in 2000, I was a junior in high school.
Yeah.
And everything outside of like high school sports and my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Didn't matter.
Right.
Like my world was so small then. And so for me, I missed that. Like I was never in that, but like explain the feeling of 2000 kind of, if you're living in America, and specifically you moved out to Silicon Valley.
Yeah. It was another gold rush. It was kind of like the days of 47 or 49 again in modern times, with the internet coming to fruition, is really what had happened. By the late 90s, there had now been several examples of internet deals, business deals having come to full fruition, and the case study had been proven that investors could make money on these deals. And so that had come to a crescendo right in 2000, in 99, 2000, 2001, where if you had any idea for any kind of business and a creative idea to somehow bring that onto the internet or add an internet business model to whatever that business was. And I mean, some of the examples I worked with were selling gardening products online, or selling furniture online, or things that were maybe counterintuitive of it back then, of utilizing the internet. It didn't matter. If you had some idea, it was a real estate grab. People felt literally that every corner of the internet was being spoken for at that time. And if you didn't speak for it, you were going to be too late. And so people from all over the country, right out of school, from other industries, it didn't matter, were coming there, and they were getting funding. I mean, all you needed to do was scratch together a business plan, and you could get venture funding back then for any kind of internet business plan. So that was the environment at which I went back there, and
it had to have been so exciting, because
it was so exciting.
Outside of like working, like a dog, I mean, you're working in a law firm that's fulfilling on all of this stuff, and so you're like kind of nonstop. Like that tempo had to have been so intense.
The tempo was intense. We were working 100 hours a week. It was right in the middle of all the action. We were on what's called Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park, if people are familiar. And so that was the deal capital of the world back then. I remember one day walking in my office from lunch, and Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are sitting there. They were starting this Operation Greenlight deal that we were helping them on, to movies on the internet, and they were going to crowdsource stuff. I've told you, but one of my experiences back then that I didn't fully appreciate is I was this young grunt attorney associate, and I was assigned to this company called X.com, and this young South African entrepreneur who was my age at the time, young, we were both like 28, and I was in awe of him because he'd already had an exit. He was on his second, company, and I got to work on that deal of merging X.com into PayPal. It was Elon, and that was one of I remember thinking, gosh, these guys are my age and they're out doing these entrepreneurial deals. But I mean,
when you look back now, like the people that you were interfacing with, they're kind of the masters of the universe at this point. Like you look at where they've gone.
Yeah.
And they built some of the biggest companies ever built in the history of the world.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that way then.
No.
But everybody felt the promise. Like that there was, everybody kind of knew that it was happening, and I know
it was in the air for sure.
And I think what was like so fascinating to me when I was talking to you is like Sand Hill Road in 2000, that was the center of the internet universe. Like out of anywhere that the action was taking place.
Yep.
And you were right in the middle of it.
It was fun to be right in the middle of it, and to be part of a movement. And that's really what it was back then.
But do you think that's what kind of like got you out of law? Like to see entrepreneur after entrepreneur after entrepreneur, and like see them doing it and going for it. And like,
that's a good insight, because there was, if you were in Silicon Valley at that time, there was a real normalization of risk and of being able to see yourself as an entrepreneur, and that you can't really underestimate that. Like, having a desire to be an entrepreneur and being taken seriously in Silicon Valley, that was just part of the culture. And so it really went a long way for me personally. And I saw this happen to others, that of this self-awareness that came into existence then of, hey, not only do I want to be an entrepreneur, but I've seen now all these examples, and I can be an entrepreneur.
No, we were talking about that earlier. When I was 27 years old, bought a house in a kind of affluent neighborhood, and bought it off the courthouse steps. Literally bought it, out of foreclosure. But everybody around me was 10 to 15 years older, and most of them business owners.
Yeah.
And I think about how much that influenced the trajectory of my life. Just seeing it, seeing, I've got 5 friends or 10 friends that have built and sold companies, and it normalizes something that's not normal.
It. Yeah.
And I think about you being in that, it kind of normalizes.
You're hitting, you're putting your finger
normal,
right on it. Yeah. Being in unique environments like that, where certain outlier type of relationships or status is normalized.
But what a
it
gift.
Can be really healthy.
Like what a gift from God. Like when you look back and say, how was this my first job out of law school?
Right.
And obviously you had to do your part, but still, like, you could have gone anywhere, It
was an incredible blessing and a unique opportunity.
So you do that for how long?
So I did that for about 2 years.
Okay.
And then I realized I wanted to not just be servicing entrepreneurs, I wanted to do it.
You want to get in the game.
I wanted to get in the game. And so I left and started a company called Cargo Bay. And the idea behind Cargo Bay, it was kind of a WeWork 20 years early, focused on industrial and small business clients. So it was kind of basically a big self-storage facility with offices and small industrial spaces that you could rent on a month-by-month basis with a credit card, without a lease, without the commitments or complications that go with leasing for small business people. And you could grow. As you grew, you could grow in real time on your real estate needs. And so that was the idea behind the business. And to this day, it might have been my best business idea. The timing was good at the time.
The product market fit was just perfect, right?
It was a great,
it was an instant hit.
Yeah, the product market fit was good. And it was at a time when, it was a good time to be developing real estate in the early aughts there.
I mean, those are kind of the go-go days for real estate.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put myself in this.
Interest rates were low.
Well, my first experience with real estate, I remember I get home off my mission and I'm 24 years old. And I went out and I sold for a summer. And I come home and I'm buying a house. I'm 21, 22 years old.
Yeah.
And I buy a $300,000 house. $250,000 house, but it appraises for $300,000. And the escrow person's like, well, do you want a $50,000 check? And I was like, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And I closed on a loan with no cash out of pocket, and they cut me a check for $50,000.
Yeah.
With a low interest rate. And I'm a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, this is real estate.
Right.
Huh? This is how real estate works.
Yeah.
And it was looking back now, it was this bubble.
Yeah.
Where, but for my first experience in it, if you bought something,
it was great.
It went up 30% every year, and financing was easy. And it was just, that was kind of it was a good time, crazy time for real estate.
It was a golden time
until it wasn't.
Yeah. And then it got dark real quick. And it's funny, when we were talking earlier, the financial crisis of 2007, that really wasn't even, it wasn't like people knew real estate was going to be hit so hard immediately. But from that point, that was the hinge point, 2007, the fall of 2007 with the financial crisis. And then real estate gradually just began to die.
It was so hard.
And it was a slow death, but it was complete. I mean, there's never been a worse real estate environment than, really not beginning in the fall of 2007, but right on through to, 2010.
It lasted a long time.
Yeah. It was rough.
That tail.
Yeah.
It was because that stuff doesn't move fast.
It didn't move fast.
It doesn't cycle through. And, and we were talking, you said it took you 2 years.
Yeah.
Of just negotiating and trying to work to just get out of this beautiful business that you had.
Yeah.
That the market just changed.
I had 2 big loans, 2 big projects, and they were both underwater from an appraisal standpoint. And so, I was quite sure I was going to have to declare bankruptcy, that I personally guaranteed these loans.
Yeah.
But I hung in there. Both the banks I owed money to were taken over by the FDIC during this time. And so I was interfacing with different regulators, and I think they gave me credit just for hanging in there with them.
Because most people didn't.
And a lot of people didn't. And I ended up doing a deed in lieu with one, a short sale on the other. But I'll never forget walking out of the bank on that when I had finally done that last deal, and just feeling the weight off my shoulders, feeling this relief. It was a great feeling, and I tell people.
But so heavy, like somebody from the outside would look at that and say, man, he's got to be so bummed. Went and did law school, has this venture that has all the promise in the world. Yeah. And the outcome is you go kind of a thankless 2 years.
Sure. Oh, didn't make $1.
Just to unwind
that whole 2
it.
years. Yeah.
And I think from the outside, that would probably be a low point. Like if somebody was looking at kind of your story from the outside, they'd probably say that's rock bottom.
Yeah.
But the way you describe it, there was a lot of daylight. There was a lot of hope, and there was a lot of excitement.
Yeah. It was the best of worlds. It was the worst.
Yeah.
Best of times and the worst of times. You're right. I mean, it was a dark time. there were no prospects. I remember, like I mentioned, I was relieved that I didn't declare bankruptcy. And I tell people to this day that my greatest business accomplishment in my whole career will be avoiding bankruptcy during the recession. But I also, so there was relief, but it was also dark because I didn't know what was next. And it wasn't like, I had a law degree, I had my bar license, I needed to get my continuing education caught up so I could get my bar license active again. And all my friends and family, you know how this is, Casey, had told me, hey, this is why you got an education. For times like this, to fall back on it and to go get a respectable job.
You'd kind of taken like the green pill at that point. Like you'd kind of seen the world in a lens that you can kind of never go back to that world, or at least never not be fully happy. You know what I mean? Like you had just like this heady experience where you're the captain of your ship. And the idea of probably like going back into that would be really hard.
It is hard. And it was during that time I took a trip with my boys and we went and visited this. We were actually in San Francisco, and a friend of mine said, hey, you ought to go check out the Presidio. They're redeveloping it. And they had taken one of the hangars at the Presidio and turned it into a trampoline park. And I didn't even know what a trampoline park was. There were maybe 10 of these in the country at this time. And I took my boys and we just had a blast. Loved it. It was a physical experience. It was this aesthetic experience, a social experience. There were people there. We were sweating. We were playing dodgeball with strangers. It was just this mashup of all these incredible things. And I left that trip and I thought, not only is this a blast, I think I've got it figured out. I can do one of these. And this would be a great little bridge, small business that would bridge me over until I find a real job as an attorney again, or whatever it might be. And so that was my mindset going into it, was like, hey, let me just do something to put food on the table.
A side hustle.
A side hustle. Yeah. It was truly a side hustle, and so that's how it launched. And I did my first one with that mindset. I remember sitting down with my wife, making a little budget. There were no pro formas you could buy on the internet or anything. I just made a little Excel worksheet, plugged in my assumptions. And I told my wife, I said, listen, I think if everything goes perfectly, we could clear $5,000 a month on this thing.
That would have been a big deal back then.
Wouldn't that have been just an incredible blessing? This would tide us over, and that would be amazing. So that's kind of what my expectations were. And sure enough, it did that and better. And we did another one and it did great, and a third. And pretty soon, I had done 3 or 4 of these, all under the mindset of this is just a side hustle. It wasn't until 3 or 4 in that I thought, you know what? These are all performing well. We could scale this.
This is the business. Like this is kind of where I need to be.
That's exactly the right phrasing for it.
I think about this like concept that Clayton Christensen made kind of popular about a deliberate strategy and then emergent opportunities. And kind of this, you're going down this path and and I think it really is important to plan. Like I'm kind of religious with making plans. But I think so much of planning is just momentum. It's just getting moving. But so many, like I think about the business that I'm in today, it was an emergent opportunity. It wasn't the strategy. It was the thing on the side that we were doing as I was focusing on the real plan. And then you look back and you say, this one is the plan. And, but sometimes it's hard to like take your eye off the real plan. You're being so efficient.
You're invested in the plan. I couldn't agree with you more, Casey. So much of planning, it's so important, but it is about managing the human animal. And you're right. I look back at my life, and if you'd have told me in law school that I'd be doing trampolines, or, you do have to be open to, or like you said, emergent opportunities and realizing when you've got a tiger by the tail, when there's something there. And that was the case with this.
But that run was just like meteoric. It was from 5 to you guys are what, 350 now?
Yeah, not quite. We're at like 320, but it was. I mean,
international.
I remember, we were at one point there when my hair was really on fire. We were developing, 15 of these. We were opening more than one a month, including internationally, opening in Hong Kong and opening, in the UK. Well, then we've got something opening in Virginia and in Louisiana, and so it was just
going for it,
just going. And you don't know at the time, your mindset when you're doing that is like, hey, where's the next one? Where's the next one, the next opportunity? We're going to get another one of these up. And you're engrossed in the project management side of getting these financed, getting them marketed, getting them up and open, getting them hired, all of that. You look back on that now and realize, oh, wow, little did I know, we were the value we were creating on a month by month basis. That was the farthest thing from our mind.
Yep.
But we were literally, we were earning $500,000 an hour back then when we were building. I'm exaggerating, but I mean, that was not far off in terms of the value.
You were just like in it as far as focus and creating.
Yeah.
But as you look back, you're like, that was productive work.
That was
like
productive
we
time.
were absolutely.
We were putting units on the scoreboard.
We were in, that was the sweet spot.
That was the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to put it, the sweet spot. You look back and realize that was really the core value creation time.
Yeah.
Doing that, and good memories.
Yeah. And so you built that. There's a third economic cycle.
Yeah.
And I think this is the one that I remember you telling me about this, and I almost got like a pit in my stomach. And we all have our COVID experiences.
Yeah.
It's almost like 9/11. There's points in life where something happens that's so emotional.
Yeah.
That you can kind of go back and remember everything in that moment. But you've got this business again that is up and to the right, that just the right product market fit, beautiful unit economics.
Yeah.
And then COVID hits, and I can't think of a business that was hurt worse by COVID. So give me kind of like, one, what happened, and two, what was your psychology?
Yeah.
As you're navigating through this storm.
Right. Well, this is at a point, like you said, Casey, we'd already made it. We'd taken on private equity.
You'd taken some chips off the table.
We'd taken some chips off the table, but the company was stable and the unit economics are great. And it's not like the business was at a stage where you're laying in bed at night thinking that it could all be gone tomorrow. And then COVID hit, and we're a consumer services business. It happened gradually as municipalities began doing shutdowns, and it was different. We had these over 300 parks, but they were all over the country and all over the world. And each state, each country had their own requirements, their own shutdown standards. But in net, during COVID, ultimately, all of those 320 stores were shut down for a net of 7.5 months. And that's completely...
I'm trying to think of any business that
completely
could
shut
survive.
Down. Right. Yeah. It would be hard for anyone to survive.
Because
no revenue.
How do you keep your
zero revenue?
Like, do you have to let all the employees go? Like what's the...
Well, and this is one of the dilemmas in a multi-unit business like that. Letting employees go, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, means that you're basically shutting that unit down. And we couldn't do that, right? We had to keep our powder dry and be ready to open up again on that unit.
You're kind of just burning.
So we had to do furloughs with our managers and try to keep them alive. Same with landlords. There's nothing in a lease that says, hey, during a pandemic, you don't pay rent. I mean, they still wanted their rent every month, and these things are closed down, no revenue. So we were trying to shoestring that and cut deals with landlords and keep that alive.
When there's kind of no end in sight, like when you're in that fog of war.
Yeah.
Like it's easy in 2024 to look back and say, man, that there was some light at the end of that tunnel. And
Didn't know that then.
And if anything, there'd be some tailwinds, that people would come back more excited to be so.
Yeah.
But in that moment, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
Like you're just doing.
You didn't.
You're just fighting to survive.
Exactly. That's exactly. And so there was no prospect at all. We once again felt familiar. I was doing workouts with our bank, and we're doing amendments with them. So it all had a very familiar feel. It started to feel like the financial crisis again.
So heavy.
And it was heavy, yeah. And we came out of that and survived. We were able to do some creative deals with, like I said, with our bank, with the landlords, with our managers and our team to keep them in the roost, during that time. And without going into all the detail, it's been miraculous. So our business has almost doubled since the beginning of COVID. You actually put your finger on it. People did come out of COVID with a appetite and a hunger for physical experiences. People had been cooped up for a long time. I think that was a big piece of it. So it came out roaring right out of COVID. People have gone back to our parks and I think other active entertainment types of venues they've gone back to. But
you want to have those experiences again. You kind of have them taken away from you.
Yeah, they were deprived of experiences during COVID. And so that appetite doesn't go away. And it was and so it came back strong. But another near-death experience. And that's what I look at my experience. It's nothing I planned, but I have been on the front lines of every major economic crisis of our generation. And that experience, you don't plan for that experience. You don't go to school for it. You just sort of uniquely and randomly are thrown into that by fate a little bit. But it does give you some perspective and experience. And I'm grateful for it. I mean, I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about mentoring. Because I know this is like something that is kind of right core to who you are and what you're about. With BYU, with the young entrepreneurs, kind of that Utah. Yeah. You're just kind of right in the heart of a lot of the young entrepreneurs in Utah. Talk to me about like why you do it and what you do. Like what's your message to somebody that's just on the front end of starting? Yeah.
You mentioned I went to law school at Duke. I'm going to give you an analogy that I learned there, and it stuck with me all these years. I'm a big Duke basketball fan, Coach K fan from my days there at Duke. And I heard this anecdote once, and it stuck with me, and it was about Coach K. And the anecdote was, what is the measure of a great basketball coach? Is it wins? Sure. Yeah. Wins and championships, certainly. But then someone put the other factor in here and it stayed with me. Or is it how many other head basketball coaches are there who have been mentored by Coach K or his assistants or who've been brought along by him? And that stuck with me. And I've found that to be, especially at this stage in my career, maybe an even more important measure of success. And I look at kind of some of my, people that I worked with and trained, and we've talked about some of them: Ty Nielsen, of course, Jordan Wade, Tim Miller.
The kids are like taking
Cord Robbins.
They're on the front end of just like
these guys are out and they're slaying dragons, and it is so satisfying to see that.
They're in the arena, like they're doing it, like they have their own economic collapses coming. Yeah, like they're gonna learn their own lessons. They have their own storms, but I can't like overstate how helpful it's been for me. In the storm. To have somebody that was 5 or 10 or 15 years in front that can come like just hold my hand.
Absolutely.
And most of it just tell me, hey, like keep on keeping on. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one that, when I talk to Ty about you, he reverences you. But I think it's because you've like poured your life into him. You know what I mean? You've given so much to him. And a lot of these guys, and I know you've done that for how many years have you taught at BYU now?
This is my 5th year now. And I mean, we share this experience, and I didn't know what I was getting into when I first started teaching at BYU. I thought, yeah, this is a worthy way to give back.
Yeah.
It's a worthy way to use and leverage my experience and some of the stories I've had, some of the lessons I've learned. And what I learned from it was a couple things. One is the energy back from those students is
like nothing
three
else.
times. Yeah, it's three times anything I bring to the table. I mean, it is an incredibly energizing practice.
Yo.
It's a hack almost. I think if most people knew what a energy hack that was, the line to be teaching over there would be long.
Yo.
Because it really is.
You love it.
I love it, and so that's been important. But it's also been an opportunity to mentor, and the reason I think it is even more hands-on in entrepreneurship than other things, because so many of these kids have ventures. As you know, Casey, they are not just going to school, they have a startup. They're have a business that they're a side hustle that they're nursing along. And so you're not just mentoring them in the principles of entrepreneurship, but you're actually clinically getting down into business models with them and helping them do
business,
it. Yeah. And that, I think the opportunities for mentoring for that are different than maybe if I was teaching math or English or anything else over there. So the entrepreneurship in particular is a fertile field.
It just requires so much more of a compass than a lot of these other fields. Like so many of these other fields, there's a specific training and track that you just can't skip. You know, I think about, some of the people that work with us at Sandlot. You went on the accounting track.
Right.
And you graduated in accounting, and then you worked at one of the big four.
Yeah.
And then maybe you got some experience, working privately.
Yeah.
But there's a track and there's a very defined path if you want to be like senior leadership in that track. But the entrepreneurship route, there's principles.
Yeah.
But you kind of choose your own adventure. You know what I mean? And I think that's the one where and so much of it is psychology, even more than skill. You think about so much of like what you were trained for in law.
Right.
Didn't prep you to go be.
Yeah.
It helped, you at least kind of can work on certain aspects of it, but that's not like what helped you build your businesses.
No, so true.
And it's interesting. So I did one of these with David Nealman a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
And asked him that question of like, what advice would you give to a young David?
Yeah.
And he's like, entrepreneurship isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you don't go to sleep obsessing about it.
Yeah.
And if you don't wake up obsessing about it, and if you can't train your emotions to deal with the roller coaster of stress, it's not the field for you, because you're going to feel the highs, but you're also going to feel the lows.
Amen.
In a more extreme manner than a lot of these other fields.
Yeah. It's so true. Hey, Casey, I mean, look, you and I have been blessed to realize some of the triumphs of entrepreneurship, but I'm not that far away from it to not remember there were many weeks, many months I would have traded for a paycheck
in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And so it's true. I mean, and you have to have that self-knowledge to know if you really can, because believe me, there's a lot of benefits to a regular paycheck.
Yeah.
And no one knows that better than entrepreneurs who've gone without that. But I agree. That urge to create and to do things overcomes all of that.
So I want to talk about the next chapter in the story, which is a public service role that you're choosing. I'm fascinated with this. Particularly, I'm always intrigued when people choose that career that don't need to choose that career.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing if it's like, hey, lived my whole life to be in this world. And honestly, it kind of turns me off. That's a lot of what turns me off.
Right.
Is it feels like there's a disconnect between reality and the policies that are created. But when you called and told me what you were doing, I was fascinated on the why.
Yeah.
So like, why?
Yeah.
Why start down this road?
That's a great question. And when we teach entrepreneurship, we talk a lot about product market fit. We talk a lot about product entrepreneur fit, which is why are you the right entrepreneur to take this idea out there? What's the nexus there between your experience or and that's what I've thought a lot about in this run for Congress. Why do I feel
so from a high level, from like even somebody like myself, I don't fully know the mechanics. I don't fully know. So you're running for the vacated Congress seat of Senator John Curtis.
John Curtis is running for Senate. He's been our representative here in the 3rd District of Utah. And so this is to replace him.
Okay.
And
so there's no sitting incumbent. There's nobody that you're trying to upend. It's kind of a jump ball right now.
It's a jump ball. And the unique lane I'm in, I'm the only one from the private sector. There are several. I'm the only outsider who's coming in here. We have several people running who are current government officials at the state or local level. And to me, that's really where I like to draw a distinction. I mentioned it earlier. For some reason, I have been on the front lines of every major economic crisis of our generation. And somehow found a way to solve an entrepreneur through that. And I think that experience is important right now in our nation's capital, and to represent Utah on a national stage there in the House of Representatives. First of all, as you know, we have one of the most important economies in this country. We call it our Silicon Slopes economy. It's actually broader than that, but this economy here has been one of the shining lights of our country over the last 10 years. We need that to be represented well in Congress. John Curtis has been on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which includes technology. It includes most everything to do with our economy.
And this is a state level, or is this a national
This is
level?
the national level.
So this is federal. This is a big deal.
Yeah, this is the federal House of Representatives. And so the opportunity to really lead, and a belief I've had over the past years, I've watched what's happened over there and watched the dysfunction and watched the lack of leaders, the lack of problem solvers, and lack of people who have really gotten things done in the real world. And they seem to have lost track of what it means and the principles it takes to get things done. I feel like I can't be on the sidelines anymore, that there's actually a good entrepreneur opportunity fit here, if you will, with my experience, and to go back there and be a leader amongst these other representatives to try to get things done. First and foremost, on the economic side, we need to get our fiscal house in order. I mean, it's a mess, and it's a train headed for a cliff because there are big problems coming up. Medicare is going to be bankrupt.
Give some specifics. Like what when you're looking, you're saying, hey, like, this is a problem. We got to fix this. Like, what are you talking about?
There are a couple things that are right off the bat, Casey. I mean, people who have basically kicked the can down the road on important things, including our fiscal house. I mean, Medicare is going to be bankrupt in 2031. Social Security is going to be bankrupt in 2033. No one has wanted to solve that or do anything about it because no one is back there to actually solve problems.
There's kind of like no incentive for a lot of these people to solve it though, right? Because it's like, why am I going to go die on this sword? I'll just punt it and turn it into somebody else's problem. And if you care about like keeping your job,
kick it down the road.
Why go tackle a tough issue?
That's exactly right. $34 trillion deficit that we're
insane.
At now.
I can't even fathom that number.
Servicing the deficit will soon be the second largest expenditure in our federal budget. And again, to your point, this is why you need people who don't need the job, but are truly interested in solving problems and going back there. So all of the financial issues. The other one, and this is obviously we're talking a lot about this right now, but our southern border is an absolute mess.
So let me give you an experience. So I go hunt down in Mexico.
Yeah.
And in Tucson.
Yeah.
And for the first year this year, there's like a full-blown cartel war. And why they're fighting is the route to be able to take people to the border.
Real estate.
And yeah, it's so lucrative. But like in the past, they would be dropping people off 5 miles and they're like navigating at night under like, you know, through the desert to try to sneak across the border.
Yeah.
Like they're driving them to the border, dropping them off, and they're walking straight across. And there's like, this was the first,
resistance.
I've been going down there for 10 plus years. This was the first year where I'm like, what dumpster fire is going on right now? Like that, like this is crazy. Like
it's crazy.
Like it's crazy.
There's Casey, no organization that you were running, no company, no organization, it would be a catastrophe. You wouldn't allow it. It's an operational failure.
I don't have like the answer. Like I served my mission in Oklahoma and it was Spanish speaking.
Yeah.
And so the people that I worked with and served most of them were illegal immigrants.
Sure.
From, South America.
Yeah.
That had came here illegally, but had came here because it was a better life for their family.
Yeah.
And what I learned on that mission was like, if I was in their shoes, I'd do the exact same thing.
Right.
And so I don't fully know the answer other than what we're doing now is a mess. Like there's got to be a way that they can get here, people can get here legally.
Well, that's the thing.
And work legally and pay taxes legally. You know what I mean? Like
legal immigration is an important part. Look, we're all children of immigrants.
Yeah.
Legal immigration is an important part of the American dream. It's a part of all these other entrepreneurship. One of the things I teach in entrepreneurship is if you look at successful entrepreneurs, they are oversampled by immigrants. Like immigrants are successful entrepreneurs in this country much more than the general population. We need immigration. We need good people to come. The problem is we have sacrificed our sovereignty and our order down there. No one knows who's in this country. No one knows who's coming over.
Like I'm sitting here talking to a guy that like, and down there it's just the local business. The cartel is like the local entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They employ the whole city.
Right.
And they're like, hey, if you're from Mexico, you pay this.
Yeah.
But if you're from China, you pay this. And if you're from Africa, you pay this. And if you're from the Middle East, and I'm like, you've got the world that's flying down here to cross, like,
that's one thing that's changed in recent years.
I'm like, that wasn't there 3 years ago or 5. Like, so it's a real problem.
It's a real problem. It's not just, we always think of it as people coming from Mexico. Well, now, those Northern Triangle countries like Venezuela and others. I mean, and you've got people from China,
Europe,
you've got people from
China,
Europe and Russia and Ukraine. We had 169 people last year from the terror watch list were caught.
That's insane.
Trying to sneak in. I mean, just since the Biden became president, there's been over 6 million people. Now listen to this, Casey, encountered at the border. Those are people we actually encounter with our agents there. That doesn't count thousands, probably millions of others who are sneaking in with coyotes or with the coyotes or the drug cartels that we never even know about. So that's a size, remember, 6 million people, that's the size of Los Angeles.
Yeah,
We've
insane.
Got more than the city of Los Angeles coming in. So we have to get organized. We have to create order down there and then have a discussion about legal immigration, but you can't really even have that discussion until you even know who's coming in, until there's some order and organization. Yep. And so it is just willful denial and lack of solving a problem. And anyone could do it. Honestly, anyone could. It doesn't take brains. This is something that any entrepreneur, could do. But it's about getting the political will back there.
You got to have some resolve. I think that's the thing is like somebody has to have some backbone.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, like, again, I am not political, have no desire to be in that world, but I've got friends that have been on the private side and have gone into it. And I always admire them because I'm like, that's a labor of love. Like you're truly like, you're not doing it for, and it's kind of a thankless job at a lot of points. And so I admire you for signing up to go make a dent in the world and to go solve these problems and like want to help.
Thanks, Casey.
Get you in that spot, because we need more people like you that know how to solve problems, that are competent, but actually like, if they lost a job tomorrow, they wouldn't cry.
They don't need the job.
They'd go do something great, and I think
that's an important
like
piece
when you have
of
no
it.
fear of loss,
right?
You're kind of dangerous because you can just do hard things without the fear of.
I agree.
Anyway, so that's the stuff that when I look at it, I'm like, let's get you in there.
We need to reestablish in our generation this idea that public service and an elected office is a noble calling. It's a way to give back. It really is. And we need, to your point, more people who don't need to do it to decide to do it. And that ultimately is going to make the difference in terms of getting a critical mass of people who are willing to make those tough choices that may not be the best for them politically, but are best for the country. And we've got to move in that direction. And that's the whole driving purpose of why I'm doing this. And I hope it will be an example to my own kids, and I hope we'll be able to make an impact and get back there and do it.
Well, I'm excited for you, 100% behind you, and would love to help however I can help. And so we'll kind of get into that towards the end, as far as kind of what are the actionable things we can do to kind of help you get in that role. I've got a couple other questions that these are like personal, that I love to ask. Just they're fascinating to me. Talk to me about your faith. Talk to me about how faith has factored through these storms. Whether it's 2000 in San Francisco and like being in that world, or 2007 or 2020. Talk to me about where faith comes in and how it fits.
Thank you for asking me. I have always been deeply devoted to my faith. And I think when you say faith, there are a couple different levels to that. One is my religious faith, and I'm a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Always been active there. And so there's faith in the tenets of that and everything that implies about our purpose on earth, our families, and everything there. There's also faith in the specific path that God has for you. And I think when you get into some of these tough situations that we've talked about here and you've experienced and we've talked about, the faith that is often most in question is this the path that God, established for me? Am I on the path that He wants me on and that I'm supposed to be on? And that, I think, when you go through some of these experiences we mentioned, I've asked myself that many times. It tests that.
Your faith. You get. It's easy to be a founder and a CEO when it's good.
Right.
And it's actually like most things are pretty easy when it's good. It's when it gets hard. That's where you really get tested, and you really got to go figure out, hey, who am I and what do I believe?
Right.
And that the reason I asked the question is that, like, in the hard times, how is it factored? Outside of just like, hey, I have a kind of, theological belief, but like in practice, how have you seen it in practice? Like, give me some examples of like, this is how my life has been impacted by having a belief.
Well, I think, it allows you to double down on your path. I've been fortunate enough where I have felt at key junctures in my life, I have felt strong inspiration and strong confirmation about the path I'm supposed to be on. And I'm not trying to be, like holier than thou or bragging about that.
But is it prayer? Is it just like a voice in your head? Like, what are those moments where you're like, because I know for me, like, I've been brought to my knees at different points where it's a prayer of desperation.
Right.
Like, I need help.
Plenty of those.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, when you're saying I've felt confirmation, like, how do you experience it?
Let me finish that statement, because what I was going to say is the times in my life when I felt the most divine confirmation about the path I'm supposed to be on, it turns out that those paths end up being the hardest and the paths that where I'm going to experience the most affliction and hardship and adversity.
Yeah.
And so those early confirmations are in contest with the reality that I'm experiencing, and I'm grateful for them because of that.
You think you needed more conviction?
I needed those experiences, those confirmations, in order to be able to keep going during those hard times. And so, it's not for every decision I make. It's not for every path I go down in life, but those ones that have ended up being the hardest. I think it's interesting that I've had the strongest confirmations about those on the front end. And I think it's because I wouldn't have been able to survive them otherwise.
I remember there was one time that was like particularly hard for me. It was like a dark moment in my career, was dealing with just some heavy challenges. And I remember just getting down and praying and kind of out of and just saying like, hey, like, I need help.
Yeah.
And like, can you like go fight this one for me? Because I'm like running out of steam. And I remember hearing like this voice, like distinct. It's like, can't you see that I've been fighting it?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm like,
yeah.
And as I look back, I'm like, I had to go down that path.
Yeah.
Like, I had to go down that path to have the seriousness of the situation force the change that ended up ultimately positioning our business to be so much stronger. But it was one of those that was really profound. I thought that I was kind of like being persecuted, or like the hand was, I had done what I should do. And like, it wasn't like a fair outcome based off of like, I felt like I'd kicked some butt. Like I'd executed, and it wasn't, and looking back, it was like, I got saved for myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the stuff that just like, when I really step back, I'm like, there's something bigger at play.
Yeah.
And even specifically, like, it's so fun for me to hear the story of your life, because you look at these chapters, but then I look at like you being pretty young, and there's this feeling that like your best music is yet to be played. But I think somebody would look at you from the outside and say, man, that's like a pretty sweet career.
Right.
But it feels like you have some gas in the tank. Like there's still some sprint, or there's still something that you're like driven to go do.
Yeah.
And that's fun for me. That inspires me, like, to see people that don't get complacent, or don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Pushing out, one thing I've learned about that is that, and you know this, but it's just, you really aren't growing unless you're outside of your comfort zone and you're uncomfortable. And, this campaign, as much conviction and determination as I have about it, I'll be the first to tell you, it has totally made me uncomfortable. I mean,
but it's humbling.
It is very humbling.
I mean,
you're asking people for money.
Me and you were upstairs, and I know how successful you've been, and you're asking me for a small check.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes. Yeah. But that, like, you don't need to do that. And so, but that stuff's good for you.
It is so good for you.
It's good to like get back and like good. And need people.
It's good to need people to pitch them for their support. To make your case. You're right. It's humbling. It's awkward in many instances. I was just out in Moab over the weekend at a Lincoln Day dinner speaking there, and people are putting you on the spot with questions and quizzing you, and some of the most uncomfortable moments I've had in the last decade. But on the way home, I looked at my wife and I said, "Isn't this great? Isn't this wonderful to be pushed?" And I can feel myself growing.
How does she feel about it?
she's in alignment, and we would not be doing this if she wasn't in alignment. She has a complete veto on it, but we've both felt the need and the call to do this. And
it feels like something's calling to you. Like I can't get off of this. Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things you can be doing, specifically on like the private side. Like, you doing another business at this point would be a lot easier than the first time you did it. You know what I mean? You just have some muscle and you've got some experience, and like to go recreate it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things you can go sign up for that require all of you.
Yeah.
And anybody who's been a founder knows that to do it right, you got to be all in.
Yeah.
But to go sign up, for one that, is really about giving back and making a difference. I think it's noble. I want no part of it personally.
Right.
But I admire people that do it.
Thanks, Casey. So, you're hitting upon all the nerves of this, and that's exactly right. It would be easier to start a company right now within my comfort zone and still stay pretty comfortable. This campaign, there's no way to do that at all
in the comfort zone.
In the comfort zone, it is totally new frontier, new skills for me. But
this is gonna we're going completely off topic.
Yeah, good.
But where we're sitting right now at my house, I've got some ribs that are in the Traeger that are being smoked. And
make me hungry.
It's the first time that I've ever got into cooking this year.
Yeah.
And it's this new thing, and it's put me way outside of my comfort zone. But there's this magic in starting something new and sucking.
Yeah.
Being not being good.
Right.
And having to go, and that learning, there really is this beauty of...
Those ribs are going to be the best you've ever eaten.
But it's not natural. They are not. It's not natural. What's natural is to stay in your strength and stay in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
But that's not where the growth happens. The growth happens when you get uncomfortable. And honestly, you go back to this trust and this faith. And if there's something pulling you to not answer the call, I think you'd regret it. I think Absolutely. If you didn't go for this thing, regardless of what happens, I think you'd regret it not going all in. You know what I mean? And
you're giving voice to it, Casey. I looked and felt and tried to find an excuse not to do it. And I knew that I had to do it. Yeah. And I still feel that way. And as awkward as I mentioned I felt in times, as uncomfortable and humbled as I felt, I'm also really enjoying it.
You're gonna kick butt. I know you're gonna win. I know you're gonna smash it. And honestly, I think we're really lucky to have people like you that choose to go do it. And we need a lot more of it. Before we finish up, I've got kind of one last question. If you were to go back, and you do this a lot with teaching, what advice would you give to yourself if you were starting fresh? If you were to go back and sit down with yourself with what you know now, how would you help a young Case Lawrence navigate the world quicker and better and avoid some of the pitfalls? What would kind of the 2 or 3 pieces of advice you'd say, hey, these things are important. Remember these things as you're making decisions.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great question. I think there are a couple different aspects to that. I think one is, I think you've touched upon it. You know what they say about the best laid plans, and yet most of my success, most of the breakthroughs in my career are not things that I planned. They're not things that I expected. They were being open to completely unexpected ideas and opportunities, and being in a position to embrace those fully and to recognize them first and foremost, and then embrace them fully. Yeah. And that really is what risk is about. is being able to take risk on those emergent opportunities and just embrace them and go all in on them. That really, I would do that. All the success I've had is because I've done that in part, and I wish I would have had more courage to do that in full
force,
and be all in. It would make all the difference. So that's the first. I think the second is to recognize what you actually just alluded to a minute ago, the importance of being in alignment with my wife, first of all, and with God. That there's something about being in alignment there where you're working in the same direction as your spouse and in the same direction as God. And you're not trying to force both of them over to your direction.
But how do you do it? I think when I look at marriage in 2024, and when I look at God in 2024, it's like there's never been more people moving away from God.
Right.
And they're like 50% of marriages are divorce. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody, when they get started, has the intent to live a disconnected life or a life with less meaning or connectivity or purpose, regardless of like sect or religion.
Yeah.
And then the second one is, when you get married, I don't know of anybody that like has any aspiration not to have it work.
Right.
And so it's obviously like if half, it's not, but for you, it's been like a linchpin. It's been a something of strength.
Yeah.
Like what are the things, you say, hey, those two things have to be in line. What are the habits and rituals that you've done over the years to make sure that they stay aligned? Because it's one thing to say, hey, this is important. It's something else to say on a daily basis. And on a weekly basis and on a monthly basis. I do these things.
Right.
And this is what keeps my wife and my family or my faith front and center.
I think, let me give you a very entrepreneur-specific answer to this, because this is really important. A lot of it is total transparency with your spouse or partner when it comes to entrepreneurship. Because one of the things is that it's one thing to take risk. It's one thing to live with risk day in and day out when you have all the information. When you're the entrepreneur, you understand day by day what the actual, you have a feel for what the chances of this happening or of this deal breaking through or of this event happening. And your wife, your spouse, is taking on all the same risk as you are.
Without the context.
Without the information. And so one thing I found is that I just have found that if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to stay married, you've got to practice hyper transparency. Like it's got to be just
how do you do it?
Ever.
Like what are, like,
and I've evolved into it. I mean,
is it kind of like a weekly date? Is it a weekly sync? Is it kind of a like how do you like build that into a practice versus
I think
event?
it is events. It is a weekly date. It is that, but it's also just more of a mindset,
a philosophy
of just openness. Like, hey, I am bringing you in here. And early in my entrepreneurial career, I used to shield my wife. And by the way, there's a certainly an honorable intent behind that, right? I'm shielding.
What you're saying is so profound that I'm thinking of a time again where it's particularly hard. And I was trying to protect my wife from it. Because I'm like, I don't want like her to get scared.
Right.
And the time, this one particular time when I was just vulnerable. I just said, I'm scared to death. Like I need help. And it was amazing how I remember one time we're on a walk and I'm like telling her what's happened. It's dire. And my wife looks at me. She's like, you need to like buck up. You need to like step up. You've got this. And I'm like, I do need to step up. And like, she was like the strength that I needed. And I'm trying to shield her from something that I'm like, no, what I actually needed was like her to build me up in this moment. So like you're describing this and I'm like, when I haven't done it, I've walked that road alone. Out of probably a noble intent.
Yes. Very noble.
But probably like I'm disconnected at home and she doesn't know why I'm disconnected. And she thinks that like, it's something that she's doing or the kids are doing. I'm just like stressed to hell with work.
Right.
Or the other one is, and so I what you're describing is actually so profound when I'm thinking about it, because I'm like,
important.
When I've done it, when we've come along together and we're better at it now than we were, we try to grow, but when we've done it, we're in it together. We're fighting together,
It's so much better.
And there's time, and you'll acknowledge this. Like, there's times and seasons. Like anybody who thinks 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, it's this pie and this. That's not how life works.
No,
like, there's times where you're extreme. You do the job until the job is done, and could be a extended period of extremes.
Yeah,
but if you're not on the same page in those extremes,
misery.
It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Yeah. And I think there's so many entrepreneurs that feel, and it's kind of an old school idea that, hey, it's my job to kind of shield my family from these stresses. But if you're going to do that entrepreneurial route, I think the faster you learn that lesson of like, it's got to be hyper transparency.
I have never heard it described the way you're describing it. And you're describing experiences I've had in my life where it's worked and where it hasn't worked.
Same.
And I'm thinking about this being like, man, it would have been better if I would have done this sooner.
Yeah. It is so true.
You know what I mean?
And like you said, I've had those same rewarding things where I've been not surprised, but maybe a little surprised at how much support how much more supportive my spouse was able to be.
And maybe how much you needed it.
I thought I was protecting her. And yet what it really was hampering was her being able to support me. And it is, look, she is taking all the same risk. She's subject to all the same vulnerability, all the same catastrophe, everything. And yet she doesn't know. She is not feeling out the information and confronted with the information on a day-to-day basis.
Wow.
And that is, you talk about the harder role. It is harder for her.
No, that is so profound. So you've got kind of number one is kind of communicate and be overabundance as you're starting this journey. Yeah. What else? What's the last?
That's a big one. So what we talk about that? Talked about being willing to take the path less traveled. Yeah.
And even like describing that, like, I had this experience, and my father-in-law is like the greatest human on earth. Yeah. Like, I love him, and I love my mother-in-law. But I remember I was in school, and it was kind of those famous last words of, "Hey, I'm just going to take one semester off. Like, I've got this opportunity, and I'm just going to go all in for this." And I never went back. And I remember, and I was doing door-to-door sales, which again, you talk about a path like less traveled. Yeah, it's not like. And I remember my father like pulling me aside and be like, "Hey, there's a time like soon where you need to get a real job." Yeah. And you know what I mean? Out of like the most sincere intent. Right. He's sharing that with me. But the second he shared it with me, I just knew he was wrong. Yeah. And I knew that I was on a path that was going to be great for my family. Yeah. And I look back and it was. I was in tune. I knew. Yeah. But it wasn't a traditional path, and it wasn't the path that the people who cared about me the most were actually telling me to go on. So that there is like a piece of like, you have to follow your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have that self-conviction, that peace, all of that, you do have to be confident in that. And I've had those same moments. I mentioned one earlier. I remember when I was in my darkest moment and all my family and friends were telling me, "You need to go get a real job." And there was a voice inside. I knew that advice made all the sense in the world. It was the right advice for them to give. But at the end of the day, I was confident in the path that I was feeling, divine and otherwise. And so I think at the end of the day, the path less traveled, in your case, in my case, that's made all the difference. The success came from being out on the frontier in a place where not everyone else found themselves. Yeah. And so embracing that, and I would have been a lot more willing to look for those opportunities in my life. Yeah. Of opportunities to kind of get away from the herd. little bit rather than be in a race with the rest of the herd. And I didn't really understand that early in my career. Now I look back and that's what made all the difference. Even though I didn't I know curate it.
Alex Dunn, he's supporter of yours, and he's special mentor and friend in my life. But we were having this conversation with him, and he was talking, we were having this conversation about the Steve Jobs commencement speech and about connecting the dots looking backward. And, as you look backwards, you can see if you wouldn't have had that law background, you never would have gone to Silicon Valley. And you never would have seen Silicon Valley from a lens of you're actually in the deals. The mechanics, no one sees the mechanics. They just see it from the out, and you're in like and you never would have done CircusTrix if the first venture would have worked.
True.
And it's, as you look back and even where you're at right now, starting this journey, you never would have started this kind of public service journey without those other life kind of altering experiences. And so it's just so it truly is so beautiful. You think about this idea of coincidences in your life, and I think all of us kind of feel like, hey, I'm in control, I'm the captain of my ship, I can go build the life. But there are experiences that you're like, that was just grace. I had nothing to do with that. That was just grace. And it changed my life, and that's the one where you kind of just have to trust that there's like something bigger at play, that you're guided, that there's this bigger picture. Anyway, it's beautiful. You have lived and are living a beautiful life. I'm so excited for the next chapter of this journey. All in on supporting you. Would love to.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, so I guess to cap it off, and this is important, how can people also support you in this journey?
Thanks for asking. Well, I would like everyone's support. I don't take a single voter's support for granted, single supporter's support for granted. You can go to my campaign website. It's caselawrence.com. On that, you can both volunteer and you can donate. I've told Casey, and I have talked about this just today. He alluded to it. I'm putting my money into this venture. I'm investing a 7-figure amount.
A lot of money.
A lot of money.
Like real dollars to show that you're serious.
It's not going to be without resources. But what I've learned in this is that the scoreboard for support and momentum in this race is other people putting in dollars, even if it's $5, even if it's $10, whatever it is. That goes a long way in the momentum and support of this campaign. So that is definitely a tangible way that people can help and support. Is to donate. And I appreciate every dollar. I take none of it for granted, and I will treat it sacredly.
Well, I want to get you in there. We're going to go work hard to get you in there. The vote is in June.
June 25th, and ballots will go out June 1st.
And I didn't fully understand the mechanics of this. I mean, Utah's like a highly red state. So the real election is kind of June.
It's June, like primary.
for the most part, very low probability that the winner of the primary will probably win the seat.
Correct.
Based off of
it's an R13 seat. The winner of that Republican primary
is going to take it. Okay. Well, appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Casey.
Can't wait to pick this up in the future. And thanks so much for coming and spending the afternoon.